To build a network of people means that you need to be able to be comfortable being vulnerable.
Okay.
Right? It's like dating. You have to be vulnerable enough to engage and start conversations.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with getting 2 yeses out and 10 no's.
All right, Learie, thanks for joining us today on the show and welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So we usually like to start the show with, talking about how we can get folks to enter a data career, being from the Caribbean, be it that you're living abroad or at home in the Caribbean as well. So give us some thoughts around there. Why should folks get into this thing called the data space? Let's call it that.
Okay.
So tell us what the data space is and why you should be considering a data career.
Sure. I have a saying that I learned: you measure what matters. And in the realm of human problems that are being solved around the world, you need to be able to measure what matters. To do that, you need data. How do you know you're moving from A to B? We naturally look for signals within our environment, which is data, to understand where we are and where we need to be. So data is just another evolution of how we catalog the world around us into attributes and determining what attributes move us from A to B. So regardless of what domain you're in, the collection of data attributes will drive the progression from A to B. So the data space is not singularly relevant to data scientists or engineers only. A lot of domains are becoming quantitative in nature and not just driving the actual algorithms, but actually people who are even non-technical driving the understanding of the context in which we're in and driving the descriptions of the attributes that need to be collected to be able to do something with it. So the whole data field is very inclusive rather than something very defined to data scientists or data engineers and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, happy you mentioned that. And I think for the folks listening, typically, I think maybe some of the folks we have brought on have been more formally in the data science realm. And as I've interacted with Learie over the years, like I've come to really appreciate, understanding data first versus just calling yourself a data scientist, because you're so dependent on all of the other plumbing, all of the other context around data in order for you to start doing, fun machine learning, let's call it.
yes.
So can you talk a bit about the importance or the difference of data engineering versus data science and how, why data scientists should be thinking about this thing called data engineering as well?
Sure. We live in an imperfect world, and we live in a world where we understand it imperfectly, and our knowledge of the world grow over time. What that means is that the data that represents what we think the world is changes on a continual basis. And as those contexts change, the attributes themselves, how we see it and describe it, changes. And so the existing data can become non-valid over time. As you start understanding what the data is, it's impossible to get a fullness of a picture without the context in which it was generated. And so the need to understand the domain space is very, very important. The data that is existing has already been collected. And understanding the problem to be solved, how do we leverage the existing data initially? And then over time, what new sources of data we need to solve the problem we want to solve. Okay, how do we get from the data we have into a format that can be used in data science? It takes some data transformations. And data transformations have a couple of reasons. One, it may not be in the format you need it to be in, which is, I think, the low-hanging fruit. in the synergy between data engineers and data scientists. But more importantly, based on the scale at which you're going to run your machine learning models, what format the data should be in. And that in itself impacts how you actually deploy a model into production, and if that model scales as you scale as well.
Most certainly, yeah. Data formats, and I think in deeper conversations with you, I even got encouraged to go learn about data formats more formally. And as I've been exploring a little more, becoming a little more fundamental, you end up trying to understand how does actual memory on a computer work, because algorithms and things like that are now being mapped down to that layer. And that's where a lot of performance gains are coming from in the future.
Yes. To a typical developer engineer, representing a data attribute as a character and a number, too much thought is not given to it, but it has huge performance impact in what you store that variable as.
So do you think folks in the Caribbean, right, even though, you know, we can say that the data ecosystem in the Caribbean is not as developed as, let's say, places like the US or China or other big countries where there's large volumes of data, do you think folks later on would be forced to get into data careers just because that's where the natural evolution of technology is going?
Yes, and not really. Yes, as fields become more quantitative in nature and we start capturing signals, and not really, because it can also limit creativity. And our cultures in the Caribbean are very creative. And so if you take a look at the people who've changed paradigms and genres, they've done what should not be done. And that happens because they don't have the context. And so the very nature of our creativity lends itself to discovery and exploration, and data can actually constrain your view of the world. So yes and no.
So I imagine we might see some new things come out of the sort of linear nature of data, right? Where humans actually inject a lot more thought in being more data-driven, so to say.
Yes, I talk about the need for sociologists in the field to understand how societies work and understand the context of the problems and how problems need to be solved and what it should evolve to. Talk about the need for linguists in the space as well. Things like NLP, natural language processing, and language construction varies by culture. And so how do you even advance these types of domains without a cultural perspective?
So for all the data scientists out there listening from NLP, it's not just maybe passing some text and maybe translating to some type of language. Language inherently has a lot more depth to it that, you know, as Learie is saying, definitely needs some more study. So I wanted to take a quick sidestep and let us know what you're working on currently. Usually I try to introduce folks at the beginning, but tell us what you're up to today.
So I started a new job, smart warehousing in the third-party logistics space. If you think about Amazon and deliveries, a lot of interesting problems to be solved as the space grows, as well as the change in consumer behavior with the impact of COVID is driving a lot of offline to online activity and understanding last mile delivery and same day delivery, and really optimizing both the order process, tracking, as well as storage and transportation logistics. So I'm very big. Globally, it's a $15 trillion space. Here in the US, on the warehousing side, it's a $200 billion space. Companies in a very big growth stage, and so I own all of technology. So really, I say technology is an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
What are the problems to be solved? So I'm spending a lot of time in all parts of the business, including our warehouse operations, and understanding the problem domain, not to replicate what exists using technology, but actually solving the problem using technology.
Yes.
And so it takes a deep appreciation and understanding of one, what exists today, an appreciation of the people who got it here today, and then appreciation of where it needs to be, understanding that people are always going to be involved, and how do we create that right blend of technology and people in a way that speeds up the adoption of technology and drives the evolution of the business.
Understood. So smart warehousing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked in warehousing before?
No,
And no experience in warehousing whatsoever.
zero. And this has
And
been a continual trend in my career where I'm hired as an outsider to the space. And what that does, it gives you that fresh lens to come in and ask the questions and around the assumptions that people already have that they've not thought of, to really advance how we think about what we're doing. And so I've always been attracted to the new. I've always been attracted to solving big problems. And I'm always attracted to an experience, an opportunity to leverage my curiosity
mm-hmm.
that I maintain throughout my life. Really.
So you are, I would say you're quite senior in your career, right? So you're chief technical officer of smart warehousing now. And one of the things that I've sort of learned and continue to try to model from you is this inherent, just crazy curiosity about new spaces. And so maybe tell some folks, and I think this is maybe for folks deep into their careers, how do you think they can sort of continue to maintain that, right? And switch industries on a dime, essentially.
Networking, one.
Mm.
You have to be able to build a strong, expansive network of people. And to build a network of people means that you need to be able to be comfortable being vulnerable.
Okay.
Right? It's like dating. You have to be vulnerable enough to engage and start conversations.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with getting 2 yeses out and 10 no's. You have to be able to add value first versus trying to extract.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as you start building relationships and adding value to people and their lives, it serves as a foundation for building the relationship. And as you start building a relationship, you start understanding what people are working on, how they're thinking about solving the problem, what is the scale of the problem, and you start understanding the full context of a number of species. What that does, it helps your brain connect things on a number of levels, almost like a neural network, which the brain is modeled after. You create so many associations between so many things that may seem random to the bystander, that you're able to generate unique thought based on the associations that exist in your mind. And so the more you learn without an intention, but rather learning for the sake of curiosity, it's the more you're able to, I think, intellectually get to a certain level where you can be put into a new space and ask questions that create new insights.
Okay.
It's what we do innately. If you take a look at a 2-year-old child, a 2-year-old child is very curious about the world around them, and there's no assumptions because they don't know, and they're comfortable with not knowing because then there's no validation. A child does not work for validation at 2 years old. They're in
Mm-hmm.
discovery mode. And they ask a lot of whys. And it's the same thing. Tap into your 2-year-old self. You don't need validation. You're literally intellectually curious about things and you ask the whys. And you get to new spaces of insights.
So there are a couple of words that I'm going to come back to a little later on, but one of them is validation. And I think one of the things you've always encouraged me to do is to not necessarily need validation for certain things as you think about career and trying to solve problems in the space. Can you give folks a little bit of insight as to that way of thinking?
Sure. I think it starts with deep introspection because the way we grew up, the way the world is, how we grew up, we discover the world based on the environment and the messages from the environment telling you about you because you've not gotten to that level of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So the adjectives we use can tend to imprison us. The words we use can tend to imprison us. The words you accept into your identity can serve as a prison. And so it's really introspection to go back to understand who you are and dropping the adjectives about how the world sees you. Because a lot of times what you know about the world growing up, it's a reflection of the messages that you get.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you start to experience life, the things you taught about yourself, you would discover a lot of them are not true. And how you deal with that to close that cognitive gap is going to be essential in understanding as you grow, is the gap widening or are you closing the gap?
Okay. And that's something you continuously think about even as you continue in your career, correct?
Yes. I've learned to be gracious in people giving me adjectives about myself, but I've learned to be gracious enough to not to accept the adjectives about myself either. So at the same time, it's okay. Some people may say you've done all this stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm still like just a little kid, my mother's child. That's it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you said your mother's child. So let's take a little segue into what's the highlight journey of Learie from high school to now. And, I'll bring up your mom a little later on because she's a pretty inspiring woman. But yeah, take it away.
Just freedom. I think I'm free.
Mm-hmm.
I strive to become more free, not in a way that people perceive like they need to use their intellect. Actually, I see intellect as being secondary to intuition and awareness.
Okay.
And so you get messages around intellectual horsepower and you need to be bright and this. And intellect is really an output of a collection of experiences and how you perceive the experiences. The beauty is in awareness and intuition, which are higher order forms of being. So for me, it's putting the right things in the right places.
Okay.
And so, I'm a practitioner of life. I like to think about myself as a practitioner of life. I get up, I give thanks, and I experience life. So I'm a practitioner of life. I'm not let me go get this so then I can be. I'm already am.
Yeah. And you're just experiencing as you
Life in the context of the impact I can make on the world as a vessel, not the thing. And so I told my niece very early on, the value of the wine is in the bottle, not the bottle. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So when we are the vessels, you surrender and you experience life, and life takes you and you experience life. And it's this, this process of discovery, and it's just exciting. So I love life. I love interacting with people. And you just have a positive impact, which is what kids do. Kids bring joy to people,
Yeah.
right?
So
And
I don't know if most people would have, if they meet you, I don't think they would ever know that. I think inherently you consider yourself to be an introvert, right? So here comes some labels that we
yeah,
might put on you. And
yeah.
for folks that I would consider myself labeled as an
Mhm.
extrovert, naturally, what would you say to folks as they network, as they pursue their career, and they don't have this inherent
Mhm.
natural affinity to just be super outgoing?
Yeah.
How have you leveraged your own comfort and managed, I don't want to say manage introversion, but
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
that feeling to still connect with people?
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to wonder why it is I was very shy, and I used to
Okay.
wonder why. But what happens is I grew up in a very high trust environment. And
Mm-hmm.
so as you interact with people, strangers and people who are new, there's this period of time that you're not sure who they are, how they connect. So there's this closeness. And over time, I got to understand that that should be secondary to your primary, which is to impact this person positively.
Hmm.
And the message is greater than the messenger. So I had to remove myself and put my purpose and service first,
Mm-hmm.
and who I perceive myself to be at the time second. And so that's how I started to come out of my shyness. Um, Introversion for me comes about, I need space and time to really let my mind wander and discover. Some people might call that meditation, and then create a new. I love music, so I create music, and that helps me relax and connect and feel really good. And then I'm
Yeah.
full enough to go give again.
To go give again.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah,
So you went to high school in Trinidad at
yeah,
Hillview, I
yep,
believe,
yes.
right? And I think one of the things that you had mentioned there was it was such a multicultural environment.
Mhm.
So kind of give us some flavor as to, as folks think of their data career, that's sort of bounded there. Um, how important was having exposure to multiple cultures and you being able to, build powerful teams and connect disparate things in the ecosystem to build data products?
Sure, yeah. I think I'm so very thankful for that experience. It allowed me to really, and then my mom, I've always confided and talked with my mom. So it allowed me to get new questions,
Get new
to
questions.
ask my mom, and really get to understand different cultures, and then ask questions around the history of the country, and then start
Mm-hmm.
understanding the socio makeup of the country, and then start understanding the economics of the country. It was the first time I met children of millionaires.
Okay.
Never met them in my life before. I was like,
Hmm.
wow, okay. At that time, I discovered that I was not of means. Before that, I never felt like I lacked anything. When I
Okay.
saw him, like, okay, this is strange. I share a bedroom with my two brothers. He has a
Mm-hmm.
room just for toys. Okay, right. So I started observing things about the world and having new questions and really understanding there are people, there are all different types of people, and really getting to know people, because
Yeah.
beyond even the material wealth and everything else, I think we are driven by two major things: identity and validation. And when you understand how humans create identity and what they use for validation, you can quickly understand the people on the teams, the kind of teams you want to build. Um, one person, for example, you may have someone whose validation comes about by being the star.
Mm-hmm.
And that personality, based on the purpose of the team, can be very disruptive. Because there's no cooperation, there's sabotaging, and it becomes very disruptive. So you have to quickly kind of understand human personality, their validation and their identity. How do they see themselves? Do they see themselves as a part of the whole human family? Is there some higher purpose? And we're all humans. And so it's not that you're striking people, but it's really kind of giving you some signals to connect with them, really impacting them in a positive way regardless.
I see. And what are some of the things that you take into account when you hire a new person, right? So you've hired data scientists, you hired data engineers, you've hired engineers, now you're running an entire engineering organization, right? That are very, let's call it fast-paced. I won't call them a startup, but a hyper-growth legacy company doing a digital transformation. What are the things that you look for? Is it coding ability,
Two things. Intellectual curiosity and learners. Intellectual curiosity, you will ask questions and continue to ask questions, and not in a way that you second guess yourself, because I'm going to create a safe environment for you to come into work to ask questions without that being a reflection of your intellect. Right? So are you comfortable being curious, as well as are you a learner? Do you have side projects? Are you interested in something else? Do you have thoughts around the industry, thoughts in general about tech? Are you a learner? And I can see evidence of demonstrated learning. Those are the two top criteria.
Okay.
If someone has a collection of certificates, it can be an indication of a high need for validation. Versus, let me just try some stuff, even though it doesn't work, there's going to be some learning.
So let's talk about certificates, right? I'm not even bragging at all, right? So having all the degrees and all that fun stuff, I have a weird relationship with school inherently, how much it teaches you, but how much it does not at the same time. And talk about folks seeking certifications versus being what you would like, you continuously harp on is problem solving.
Yeah. So there's a context for certificates and learning. I myself love academic. I read academic papers all day. So I love academia. Within certain domains, like some parts of tech, it moves so fast. So number one, what we do today is not going to make it to a curriculum until 6 months to a year from now. When it gets to the curriculum, it's going to spit out a couple graduates another year after that.
Right.
In those 2 years, we would have moved on to something else.
So always behind. Academia to a degree will inherently always be behind what the latest things are in production.
And those things are the implementable things. Academia is very good at providing a strong foundation of the basics.
Yes.
Like I had a conversation this morning, and we talked about some stuff, and I went down to basics. It was like, wow, yeah, I didn't realize that. The foundation is very important. And that's why I talk about being a practitioner of your craft, understanding foundation and the basics, and then understanding the design problems, and then understanding the implementation people have created to solve things, and getting back ever so often to the design problem, design thinking, and coming forward again.
Let's segue into that piece of your work history, right? So you went to college, I believe you did computer science as your undergrad and a minors in business, I believe. Yeah.
So I went to John D. I did electrical engineering.
Okay.
And I went to UW St. Augustine and did a double major, computer science and management, and then did a master's in computer science.
Okay. And you did a master's at home as well in UAE as well. So all your education came from Trinidad, correct?
Yep. Yep.
All right. Nice. And I think one of the reasons I really like your story is because you did all of your education in Trinidad and you were able to go forth and achieve big things. Tell us what happened sort of after that and where did you go next?
So there's this symbiotic relationship between student and institution, right? I say is it the student or is it the school?
Okay.
Because a lot of students go through a lot of school systems and they don't get to the level in their domain. All right. Because even while I was at UE, good instruction and everything else, but it still is on you to understand the content curriculum, the design thinking about what is being thought, and then further research into the implementation, everything else. So even while I was there, I read extensively.
Okay.
And so I didn't see the institution being my education. I saw it being a part of my education.
Okay. Yep. I wish somebody had hit me with a stick like 10 times throughout school to be like, hey, this is not the only thing you're going to learn.
And some students struggle with context and content, right? Because they can't connect what they're learning to something in the real world.
Yes.
Right? And it's not that they don't have the intellectual ability to understand it. It's literally, I don't know how this is relevant to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
But I always made time for introspection and try to connect those to the real world.
Okay. So what would you say to folks in their college career right now in high school, right? You know, we usually mentor a group of folks there. What would you say to them to help connect those dots?
Sure. The design of education today, and it's changing, education was designed to create workers.
Yeah.
The age, the industrial age needed workers. And the skill sets that were needed was the ability to read, understand, and follow instructions.
Okay.
And the education system was designed to promote the best students who can read, understand, and follow instructions.
Mm-hmm.
The kids that fall outside of that are the kids that ask, why? Right? And so the education system has kind of sidelined a lot of those kids who are really the creators.
Yes.
And the age we're in now, I would say the age of automation and the knowledge workers, now there's this reverse switch where technology is replacing follow these instructions, and the workers being hired are the ones who are why let's create a new system.
Coming back to the space of just being in ambiguity and creating something new.
Yes. If you look at the people who have impacted Trinidad and Tobago in particular, a lot of them were not formally educated.
Right.
And they've changed the trajectory of the country. Winston Spree Simon and Laventil created a only musical instrument to be created in 20th century, the steel pan. No formal education. Right? Uriah Buzz Butler, labor leader, changed the political trajectory of the entire country, together with Capildale. So I am big on the creators, not just technology, because technology, it's just the tool to create. And if we can get the collection of people together, the creators and the technologists and the sociologists, I think we would evolve societies faster.
So given that you want folks to, or you're suggesting this notion of building, this notion of creation, tell us a bit about some of your family, right? So some of your family, actually, I think most of your family, younger family members, they all can create, some of them are the top of their field. Tell us a bit about how you've moved that mindset very closely into your family and the way that it lives.
Sure. I think we all inherited this curiosity from my mom
Mm-hmm.
and just our ability to learn. And then this introspective way we have of dealing with who we are and evolving who we are over time.
Yeah.
The identity piece. So it's about discovery. And the approach I took was, if you're interested in something, let's go explore it and see what's going on, and let's do something. And then that may change and say, hey, interested in something else, let's go explore it and do something. Because it's in the process of doing that there's valuable insights, and it's the habit of doing that keeps you adding value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different from the traditional British system, which is the foundation is on knowing.
Okay.
Right?
Versus doing.
Versus doing. Doing takes understanding. Knowing takes memory.
Mm-hmm.
So today we have Google. You want to know something, you can Google it. So the value of knowing goes down, the value of understanding goes up, and the value of delivery is on the top icing of the cake.
Value of delivery. Huh. So I wanted to ask, after you went to college, right? So now you have a bachelor's in computer science and management. Why did you do both? You know, typically if you're doing computer science, you're like,
yeah, a lot of people ask me the same question back then, but I always loved people, and I know that you have to work with people. And so I always saw myself as owning a company, running a successful company, having to deal with the teams of people. And so I'm like, okay, I need to understand organizational behavior, organizational design, managerial economics, and the whole domain of business.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on my own choice for bachelor's. It was like, oh, if I have to come back home, I need to get a job in oil, right? So very different sort of thought process doing chemical engineering.
Yeah.
Something I didn't necessarily care to do. So with that,
I wanted to do a lot of things. I wanted to do history. I wanted to do literature.
Okay.
I wanted to do sociology. I wanted to do psychology.
But in the end, what kept you more on the tech side versus pursuing a more liberal arts type approach?
Economics. Came from a poor family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the line of sight to economics. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think now that I'm in tech and I see other folks, I'm like, you know, those are fantastic careers. They bring you a lot of joy. But at the end of the day, like you watch, I think there's a fine balance between bank account and happiness, right? There's a certain amount of happiness that I think that comes with the bank account after a certain point, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's.
So I've studied the material on my own. I'm not certified, but I've studied material on my own. Dr. Eric Williams, Making of the West Indies, Capitalism and Slavery. I've done a lot of, I read a lot of historical pieces from different cultures. And so I got to a point where, okay, I don't need a certificate. I still have the information. I still understand the whys, and that has helped me shape my view of the world.
Yes.
So it's still my love. But economically, just the tech thing became a thing. If it was up to me, I'd probably be a music producer somewhere, just on a beach somewhere and having a good time, right?
Yeah, we'll come to your music. Well, I think you'll always be in tech because you want to buy better music equipment. So you have more money. So you went to work at TSCT, I believe, after college, right? And so tell us about your career there and what led you to coming to the US and starting a different, I wouldn't say starting a different career, just extending it into something different.
When I graduated from high school, I knew I needed a job. I had this concept of one shot. You get one shot.
Okay.
When you're poor, lower socioeconomic environment, a lot of your life consists of one shot.
Okay.
You don't get multiple opportunities a lot of times. So from very young, I knew and I internalized this concept of one shot. And the key to that one shot is preparation. And so I would always prepare as if, and I would always get the one shot. So I remember leaving high school and 1990, and there was this opportunity. My dad taught me the benefit of persistence, the value of persistence. I'm very persistent, going on HR and just sitting, oh, I'm in a meeting, don't worry, I'll wait right here. I'll call you. Okay. Next day I show up. I said, I'll call you. It's okay, I'm sitting right here. Right? Just the value of persistent. I was very persistent with my father's urging. And then I got a little break, clerical officer. I'm like, all right, working 4 hours a day. I'm like, all right, my foot is in, I'll do the rest. It's another thing. I always said, my foot is in, I'll do the rest. So part of that came from my mom just explaining her story and just the trajectory of her life, and understanding that sometimes you get the one shot, and the shot, it's so small, you have to take that shot and make it into something. You cannot wait for the perfect shot.
Okay.
And so I internalized that very young. One shot, and all I need is just a little foot in the door. And I took that and started to run with that. It was an interesting journey to look back on, but there were many hurdles, and all during these hurdles, I would think about it's either you jump over, or like I'm willing to die to get over the hurdles.
Okay. That much determination to succeed.
So I remember getting no pay leave. No one had gotten no pay leave ever. But I said I need no pay leave to go and do this thing and come back. And never happened before. And I remember getting it after like it was very, very rough. And I came home and I told my dad, hey, I'm going to go on a no pay leave. He said, how are you going to survive? I said, there are guys hanging on the corner for 3 years and they're not dead yet. So I won't die. The only difference between me and them would be I'm studying stuff in a book.
Yes.
We both unemployed, but my head is in a book, and they're not going to die. I won't die. And he's like, all right. That was it. I got there first semester. One guy who I went to high school with said, oh, you're in university? I'm like, okay. And it's been a consistent pattern of some messages coming through people saying, oh, you can't.
Or what are you doing here? Type thing, right?
Yeah. Or you don't belong, or you can't, or they will never make you, or things like that. One guy said they will never make you a manager. Why are you doing this degree stuff?
Wow. And they told you that, like,
yeah, it's a good friend of mine.
Seriousness.
It's a really good friend of mine who I went to high school with and everything. I know his parents and everything. It's a good friend of mine. And I said, okay, and kept it moving.
Yes.
And then fast forward some years, I keynoted a conference for the same employer with the entire CEO group, government ministers, and everything else. So all that to say, people will set up expectations for you based on their own perception.
And their own limitations as well, right?
Yeah. And your job is to shake that off and keep moving. That's your job. I always say you cannot stop people from throwing seeds in your garden. You can choose what you want to water.
Okay.
So they will talk. You choose what you want to water.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter who the person is. Sometimes your parents don't even understand your trajectory, what it is you're trying to do.
So that, I think you bring up a really good point. And I think for the folks that are living at home in high school, early college, especially if your parents were not in tech, I think it is very difficult for parents to see the future, right? So let's say one contrived example could be cryptocurrency. They'd be like, oh, that thing is not worth anything, but there's so much other innovation going around that space that, give some advice to folks there who they may not have people in their immediate circle that understand that reality or the new reality of the technological future. What can they do to find the strength of conviction to continue pursuing this type of curiosity?
Protect your dreams. I remember I bought my first computer, and there were people in the neighborhood telling my father that was 666 Mark of the Beast.
Wow. And this was, what year was this?
1994.
So this is at the height of, is that like around the .com?
No, not even before
not
that.
Even, okay. Before, okay.
Yeah. But I quickly saw what was happening in the world, and they convinced my father that was on the way to the 666 Mark of the Beast. My father came and said, hey, this computer, this is Mark of the Beast, blah, 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 like drama.
Wow.
So I understand how those messages can impact you as a kid when you're young. But you have to literally lay everything on the line. Everything.
One of the stories that some advice you had given to me when I started my first job after college as like a big man was you read all of the manuals, right? So you were a wireless communications engineer, and you told me the story that you read every single manual that existed for all the equipment, and that enabled you to become the de facto expert. Can you tell us what the result of that particular tactic, let's call it that, did for your career?
Yeah. At the time, we had Nortel network equipment. Nortel was the largest company in Canada, big telecom equipment vendor. They supplied PDF documentation on CDs. It's probably the helmsman. It was probably like 200 PDFs on each CD. It's probably like over 100 CDs. But I'll be genuinely curious about the stuff. So I just read a lot, and that culminated into building and doing the contingency plan for the Y2K in Trinidad.
Okay.
It needed someone who understood every single piece of equipment down to the bit level, ones and zeros. And that's what I talk about, like, learn because you want to learn and know. Don't learn because you want to like get someplace, so therefore equals. It's learn because the world is a fascinating place, and just learn so that it just brings you joy.
Okay.
Everything else fits in. No matter how weird you may be doing math with history and psychology, no matter how weird the combination may seem, just focus on learning, and it comes together eventually. It sets you apart. I always tell you that it sets you apart.
Yeah, that one piece of advice I would say for my own career was my defining factor, right? So I started in a railroad company, didn't know crap about the railroad industry. I started as a data science intern. So just like yourself, I got my one little shot, and they actually put us to sit in the corridor. So they didn't even put us in the office. We were in the corridor. It was me and a Chinese guy, like 2 PhDs, and you just sit in the corridor and that's your office. So, you know me, I relax myself and whatnot. But I read every single piece of literature that I could understand about the railroad. I talked to as many people as I could, and I ended up becoming the de facto expert in a particular piece of equipment that allowed me to get a lot of leverage to get visas sponsored and all that type of stuff. So just for folks listening, any job that you get into, understand the domain. It's not about you as a technologist and you know all these algorithms or know how to set up pipelines and databases. That's how you solve a problem. But if you can't resonate with the people in the business, you're not going to be as valuable there, right?
Yeah. And the importance of mentors and sponsors. Very important.
Okay, so talk about that. This conversation in itself, I would say is, a big factor or an example of good mentorship. But talk about sponsors in the company as well.
Sometimes you need a breakthrough. Mentors can mentor you, help you understand the landscape, how you need to approach things, how you need to think about things. A sponsor is someone who would literally give you a break.
Okay.
Literally reach out and put you in that place. How that happens, you build relationships. Sometimes mentors turn into sponsors. You build relationships. You become visible. Most people suffer from...
You become visible.
Yeah. Most people suffer from just not being visible and visible enough. And it constrains your growth. So it's becoming visible, building the relationships you need, and asking, direct ask. A lot of people are scared to have a direct ask.
Yeah.
Direct ask.
That's a big one. One of the things that I feel very indebted to you specifically, actually. But I wanted to share a story about networking. So I think it was, how long have you known each other? 4 years now, maybe?
Or maybe more,
or maybe a little more. Yeah. And I was really into conferences, and this is hopefully I'll make it quick. So I just reached out to some conference organizers in California. It was some crazy personal development conference, and I didn't have any money. I was a student, but I always wanted to be around people who were in better positions than me. And I was like, I'll do anything. I'll come clean toilets, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm coming. And they're like, okay, find yourself here. I was trying to maybe drive across the state from Florida to California. Didn't really make sense. But I stopped up in San Francisco and I went to a networking event. And the reason I'm telling this story is one of the things we highlight in the show is to always leverage the fact that you're from the Caribbean, right? To call it enhance your career, but also to just connect with people across the globe. And, I heard some fellow with a Trini accent, and then I kind of walked up to you and I was just like, where you from? And that started off a whole chain of events years later, right? And you were super gracious with us in San Francisco and opened my mind as to like, wow, this is what a Silicon Valley is like, right? And then as a student, I had nothing to offer. I would say people who were in higher positions than I had. So I introduced you to Kyle, and you all became good friends. Their conference Tech Beach Retreat, shout out to Kyle, took off. And I think almost 3 years later, Kyle invites me to come back to San Francisco to just go roadshow and find speakers. And you had known the CEO of my former company, LucidWorks, and introduce him to Kyle, and then Kyle introduces me to him. And 3 weeks later, I have an offer for some 6-figure salary working remote, right? That was my second job. And the reason I really like to tell that story is as you network with folks, and sometimes you have nothing to offer but your connections or taking notes, anything, that one-shot mentality, you never know it'll pay off. So, take some chances and see what happens.
Let me add some flavor to the don't have anything to offer.
Okay.
You had a lot to offer, and people have a lot to offer, but there's a tendency to self-devalue. You offered me a chance to open some doors for you, and you offered me a chance to connect with your level of hunger that also generated that level of hunger in me as well to keep going.
I see.
So I love to like connect with people and feel their hunger, and I feed off that hunger.
I
So
see.
it's a symbiotic relationship. It's almost like some artists say when they go on stage, they can feel the energy of the crowd. And the more energy the crowd gives them is the more they perform. It's very
Yeah.
symbiotic. So the mentoring gives so much to the mentor because the mentor is able to understand just different psychologies, how people think about things, and that helps them even do a better job with other people as well.
Okay.
So there's a lot of value that I get mentoring as well, regardless of who the person is.
That's good to know. And, I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about, looking at you as a mentor is these little tweaks in your mentality, right? So even sometimes I try to reach out to CEOs and stuff like that, and you still feel this notion of devaluing. But I think when it comes back to me is I think I've inherently had that one shot mentality for a lot of my life, but I didn't necessarily come from the socioeconomic background that you did. I think I was on the flip side. I'm like, wow, I didn't have a bad life. I had a pretty good life. And I was like, but I looked at my ancestors and I looked and said, okay, my grandfather who came from China, his entire family was killed in China. So he hopped on a boat and came to Trinidad and became a super successful businessman in Trinidad, but he came off a boat, right? And
And
the other side of my,
those stories of struggle is really stories of resilience that we need to continually share so that people understand that the situation that they are in doesn't mean anything. The environment you're in doesn't mean anything. It's what do I learn from being in an environment and how do I move on from here?
yes,
Right? And the stories of resilience is needed a lot more so that people understand that the journey of the struggle, it's the essence of the virtue. Without struggle, you don't know yourself. You have beliefs about yourself,
yeah,
right? You may believe you're strong, but until something tests that strength, then you know,
then you really know that you're strong.
right? And the gym, resistance builds strength. How do you become resilient?
Yeah,
The trials, right? So you have to embrace the context which you're in. Understand what it is I have to learn in this situation. And when you learn that, you move on to the next thing. But the beauty is in the struggle. Like I call life is the beautiful struggle.
so happy you kind of brought up this notion of struggling and let's call it going to the gym. I think another thing that connects us is this notion of the body is a vessel that enables you to have more and more success. And so talk about your focus on making sure your body's healthy. In addition, I think you take music very seriously as a medium. And I think that actually helps you to become a better technological person overall. Can you share some thoughts there?
Yeah. On the health exercise thing, I think my dad passed when I was maybe 27. And it impacted me in a couple of ways, but in one in particular, it's the focus on health. I saw a man who didn't enjoy the benefit of a retirement or retirement savings.
Wow. So you work all your life to save up to enjoy yourself, and then you were gone.
And then I saw the impact of him not being here on the remaining family members. So my mom is 82. I tell her every day her health is a gift.
Yes.
And we have to understand that our health is not personal only. It's the people who you touch and impact every day. They're also impacted.
They rely on that energy, right? And that I would say maybe non-dependence, right?
So that's how I view health. I'm a steward of my health. And that is what I strive to maintain. So that's how I see it. The second thing you ask, forgot.
Music.
Yeah. So music has always been, I'm originally, not originally, but I'm a spiritual Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody knows spiritual Baptist, it's music is a core tenet of the
Okay.
faith.
Mm-hmm.
The understanding of sound as a vibration and the understanding of how sound vibration impacts the human psyche.
Yes.
That's, I'm born bred into that. So it's just a natural progression of that.
Mm-hmm.
And really, how do I express um, certain vibrational energies I may feel in a way that is uplifting and in a way that I like to make the music that I would like to listen to, because sometimes that's not available.
Yeah. And that allows you to sort of continuously feed your energy and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've always, I think if most people meet you, they would think that you might be a slacker, right?
No.
You're just this island man with this ras and you're chilling. But what they might not see is just grind, just hardcore, grind, pushing code, building products. But you always end up having a smile on your face, right? And I think maybe many folks who choose the grinding life, let's say, and or finding more from themselves to push into their careers, let's call it that, maybe don't smile as much. Why is it that you've chosen to maintain that demeanor?
So humans are good at masks. So the element of masking exists in cultures.
Yeah.
And people have learned over time how to manipulate using mask, right? Which I think it's kind of, you look around nature, there's animals that when they see a threat, they look bigger than they really are. So there's this element of masking that exists in the human psyche. And there's this focus on image in the way society is constructed today versus like self-development. It's all about image development and crafting your image. And for me, I think that when I think the development of self overrides image because people feel your energy, right? We say we feel your vibes or your vibration. They feel your energy. And the images that they view people through kind of falls away.
Okay.
So for me, I'm not validated by the thoughts of people. I am validated by my ability to let go and allow myself to be used at deeper levels over time. And that's nothing to do with any other human being. That's between me and my creator.
Yeah.
And so as I'm doing that, I feel good doing it. And that makes me happy to know that I'm being used towards this purpose.
Yes.
That's sufficient for me.
So talk about, I think other people, if they're going to hire you, they'll be like, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's, let's call him, he's
Adjectives, the
introverted.
adjectives, right?
And the adjectives. But then when we start talking paycheck, they're like, oh, this man is serious. Okay. So talk about maybe some things folks should be thinking about as they come out of school and they enter their first job, thinking about salary. You've always encouraged me to, like, some numbers you've told me to call. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. And there's this whole, call it a whole other self that says, absolutely not. You can never, achieve those numbers in terms of salary and whatnot. And yeah, talk a bit about that mindset to career progression.
Sure. A lot of people don't understand economics and money, fiat currency, and the time value of money. And then you get compensated based on the size of problems you're solving.
Right.
And the shortage of people who can solve the problem. That's what you get paid for. You don't get paid for working.
Paid for solving problems.
So the bigger the problem you're solving, the more you're compensated.
Okay.
So when someone says, I want to make a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
I hear, okay, you're going to solve some big problems that exist that people struggle solving.
Yeah. I think the challenge for most folks is, especially maybe, oh, you finish a PhD, I should be making this amount of money, and you enter an interview and I have these qualifications, so pay me. And yeah, talk about hiring folks with that type of attitude, and maybe how far they don't get.
The companies I work for and the spaces I work in, I'm hired to solve almost big and almost impossible problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I need people who are dreamers, fearless, and driven by purpose
Yeah.
and outcome, not output.
Outcome versus output. Okay.
So you're not getting paid to come to work 8 to 4, 9 to 5, do what you can, and then go back.
Mm-hmm.
Not paying. We are working towards this purpose, and you'll be compensated accordingly.
Yeah.
Me, in particular, I like that people are compensated such that they don't have to think about their economic circumstance, but they can focus on what it is we're trying to achieve.
Right.
So I try to make people very comfortable with their life in general so that they have the mental capacity to think about what we're working on and ensuring that while we do so, they do so in a balanced way.
Yes. That makes sense. And I guess circling back, right, as we've sort of gone through this interview, I think most folks would have been like, oh, where's the data science? Where's the data engineering? And one of the things I wanted folks to take away is how much of your career, especially a data career, has to do with, I would say, yourself, right? And your ability to see new things in the world, introspect, create new things, to go solve these really ugly, very hard problems that you're not going to learn how to solve in school almost. And as we get a little closer to the end, you sprinkle some of it throughout the conversation, but what are 3 principles you live by? I'll put some labels to it, don't worry. Yeah.
Always be true to yourself and who you are as you evolve and grow. That's number 1. Number 2, you are a creation just like the rest of creation.
Okay.
So be good to creation.
Yes.
Number 3, learn to love yourself. All of you. Every single thing. It doesn't mean that you're accepting who you are, but you are understanding who you are at the time.
Yep.
And that awareness helps you grow into who you want to become.
Yeah, there's that particular last one, I think for folks to take away is you are always pushing in your career, always trying to learn something new, never really settling. And I think maybe some folks approach that from, I am not enough, I need to be more. So there's this kind of negative view of yourself. I think I might share a bit of that. But you approach it quite differently, it seems.
Yeah, it's something I call a watcher. So in growing up, we have watchers, and think about the little voice in cartoons. So based on what's happening, our psyche spins up these watchers, and sometimes the watcher says, oh, this guy is really, really good. Damn, I mightn't be that good. But you have the ability to spin up other watchers and say, well, no, actually, this is great that he's that good. He can knock out this piece, and I can go knock out this other piece. Right? So we have the ability to spin up these watchers to override the negative watchers that we a lot of times grow with. And then you start sitting back and observing your thoughts and observing why you're thinking these ways, understand the root of why, and then you could come forward with that new knowledge of yourself.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So let's ask, what are 3 books you recommend? You're an avid reader, and maybe talk about how folks can learn to develop that. I don't like to call it a skill, but develop that passion or develop that curiosity for reading.
I would say number 1, The Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams. That allowed me to understand that the messages I was getting through the media didn't represent all of what African or Blackness is about. Mm-hmm. So I was able to understand kingdoms, Dahomey, the Mali Empire, Timbuktu, like the Nubians and Pyrie, the pharaohs. And so I was able to see, and then women leadership, right? In Zinga, Naibingi, in Uganda, like you see Black excellence existing for 35,000 years, right? The Lemombo bone, Swaziland, first calculator, the Aishango bone, 25,000 BC. Like you start understanding, like, wait. Okay, I am sufficient and I am enough. And over time, and I started digging into like the Mayas and the Aztecs and the Amerindians and the Caribs, right? The Indus Valley civilization. And I'm like, wait. The world is currently constructed. It's made up of so many cultures that it's impacted the world, that we are just part of another culture. And I want to impact the world. So I was able to shake off a lot of the negative imagery around Blackness that exists today.
Okay. And right? That allowed you to have mental space to push.
And understand that race is about erasure. I just had a conversation last week. White is erasure. You're erasing a whole bunch of cultures. When people say I'm Irish, I'm like, okay, are you Celtic or Druid or what? Oh, yeah, like it's erasure. So this system that is 400 years old is about erasure. And so once I understood that, I became very comfortable, even more comfortable with who I am.
Yes.
And now that allowed me the brain space to focus on what it is I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the world is a big place. Like if someone doesn't like you, it's fine. It's 7 billion people. Yeah. It's a big place. Just move into where you're valued. That's it. Don't internalize your lack. Figure out where you fit and keep it moving. So that's my number 1 book. Number 2 book, I would say the Book of Secrets by Osho.
Okay.
And thirdly, 20 Difficult Things to Master in Life by Osho.
Oh. Okay. Anything to think about while you read those books?
I think it's just gonna unlock a lot of misconceptions about self, the world, why it is we think the way we think.
Good. And I think for me, in doing this interview, right, there is this notion of you're gunning for success, right? And I think looking at where our ancestors came from, especially in the Caribbean, most people who are from the Caribbean don't necessarily have all of their roots there, right? They're typically a mesh of different places where people have come from. And even if you've achieved a lot, so to say, in whatever scale you're measuring, there's lots of room to grow, right? And there are different ways to grow happier, pursue your career. So that's pretty exciting that, you shared some really good gems with us today.
So the word success.
Yeah.
That's not a word I use.
Okay.
That's not how I describe myself. Because again, that is based on a system of validation. If I wake up tomorrow, I'm successful. I'm alive. Yeah. I'm here. That's all I need. Like, I wake up, I'm grateful. Thank you. I'm grateful. What does the day bring? How can I impact things positively? And that's it. At peace, that's my success. That's it. have nothing to do with anybody else or what I do. Who I
Okay.
am and how I evolve and grow, to me, that's the important piece, not some what I do based on what I do, success. Like I.
Mm-hmm. So for folks listening in, if you wanted to maybe recap the different industries that you've shifted into, right? So you started off in wireless communications, I think, and then, I think you went into telecom.
3G, designed the first 4G network in the US. I went into transit, positive train control, designed a wireless system that control trains in New York, Metro Transit, and SEPTA, Philadelphia. And then moved to Silicon Valley, had my own startup, then went to AT&T, ran cloud, the cloud platform, moved to product innovation. We innovated a lot of products that now generating hundreds of millions of dollars. And those products stem from customer service, cybersecurity. Even now, what is big, it's the anonymized, how you share anonymized data between companies and regulated spaces. Right? So that's some stuff I worked on in 2016 is now big. Some of the companies are like triple blind, right?
Okay.
And then moving to smart city, where we, for public safety and transit vehicles, turn the light green to speed up time of arrival across the largest metros in the world, New York, San Francisco, all of Canada, Montreal, Quebec, Brampton. And then moved to education's always big with kids, ed tech. Did a bunch of stuff around data and analytics, and now I'm in the logistics space.
All right. So you've been in the data space and you've been able to cross, I think, 5 or 6 different, as people would call them, completely separate domains. But, I think you've pieced a lot of elements across them together, right?
Yeah. I would say in the data space today, a lot of problems are similar once you start working with them. One, there's going to be device-related data, right? So very IoT-related, device-related data. 2, streaming, real-time streaming data at volume.
Yes.
How do you ingest that data and make sense of it? 3, security on edge devices. 4, I said security on edge computing.
Yep.
How do we take some of the things we're running in the cloud and push it down to the edge?
Yeah, that's big.
5, how do we query and process data that is stored in multiple data systems, multiple data stores? And there's always techniques. Techniques were like, let's build a warehouse, data warehouse. We're going to take all the data from everywhere and put it in this one big, we did all that in AT&T back in many years, 2012, big Hadoop lakes, right? And then we ran Hive queries to actually get the data we need, pig scripts. And then we put it into another data store, Apache Spark. Okay, we run some Spark jobs to then transform some stuff. So there's always going to be data transformation and techniques around that. Today, it's big on how do we put another platform on top of that and push down the queries, map the schemas and metadata, and push the queries down to where the data is.
Right? So not bringing all the data in, but actually going to where the data is.
Yes.
Correct.
So you see the rise of companies like Snowflake last year, Dremio, right, based on Apache Arrow. Right?
Yeah.
And so, and then you have a growing space of how do we do compute query engines at scale? Because there's a big need for BI, business intelligence, visualizations like Tableau, Looker, QuickSight. And how do we do that at scale? And then there's a concept of a single sign-on. Today, there's a lot of different SaaS applications. You move from Microsoft Office to NetSuite to HubSpot. And how do you do a single sign-on solution so that your employees don't sign on 12 times and manage that process? So you see companies like Okta, both Auth0 to do single sign-on, and how you build a system at the corporate level, enterprise software that leverages a single sign-on.
So there are tons of stuff you covered there. But one of the things I wanted to circle back to is it's not just about machine learning, right? At the end of the day, machine learning needs to solve some type of problem, and whatever stuff that you work on, if you're a data scientist, has to live within a system that functions well at scale, and ultimately solves the problem. So appreciate you sort of giving us a different flavor, not only data science actually depends on many other things for us to exist. And what are two things you would say to a high schooler, a person in college, and someone in a professional career that they can, take with them to accelerate their data journey or just their journey in general?
Structure your life. Just like budgeting, finance, structure your life to make time for learning. Map out your energy cycles during the day. Like, I wake up in the morning, from 6 to 8, I can do 4 hours of work. Right? My energy is the highest. So I mapped out my energy. After lunch, I can do a lot of meetings, not very deep cognitive stuff. So map out your energy cycles and optimize the task, the hard task, in the most productive
energy.
Yes. Yeah. So structure your day, optimize your day, and get involved in something that allows you to build your sense of discipline. So consistency.
Sound like you're telling people, make sure they're going in the gym. I'm just kidding.
Wherever it may be, consistently. Yeah.
Cool. And once again, I've personally benefited a lot from your mentorship. And, one of the things, like I said, I wanted to highlight in this episode was just a completely different way of thinking, right? And how it's not all about what you learn in school. There's lots of work that you inherently have to do internally to have, I would say, a super fruitful career, especially in the data space. And hopefully folks go out there and innovate and take their time.
Yeah, the big trees grow from rich soil.
Big trees grow from rich soil. Okay.
Sometimes we focus on the seeds and forget the soil that needs to nurture the seed.
Yep. Good, man. Well, thanks once again. And yeah, we'll have some follow-up episodes as well.
Yeah, so it was enjoyable. Thank you for this.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Later.